Welcome to this PowerPoint presentation on power. Throughout history, we've always been very suspicious of people who have power, very cautious of people who have power, unless, of course, the people with power is you, in which case everything's just fine. But when it belongs to other people, we immediately think it's going to have bad effects. So you've all heard the expression that all power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. An alternative point of view is that it's not that power corrupts, but that power is a magnet to the corruptible. But nevertheless, there is this long-standing association between corruption and power. And there is in fact evidence that power can corrupt. For example, it leads us to place our self-interests first. So if you have power, it seems to be very much part of human nature to think of using that power in your own self-interest before you use it any other way. It helps us to objectify others. People who have power are less likely to see other people as individuals and more likely to think of them as members of groups. Consequently, having power can compromise your moral judgment. And powerful people react very negatively to any threats to their competence. Just think of some of the famous politicians that come to mind when we think about power and corruption, and you see a lot of these characteristics there. So, what are the sources of power that people have in social situations like work organizations? Most of the thinking about the different bases of power come from a theory about social power developed by two people named French and Raven in 1959. And according to French and Raven, some power bases come from the situation that one finds oneself in, and some of them come from within the person. There's some characteristic of the individual that gives him or her power. So let's examine the formal power bases first. There are three kinds of social power that are based formally on the situation: coercive power, reward power, and legitimate power. In coercive power, the individual has power because he or she controls the rewards and punishments that are available to be meted out in the situation. So in an organization, the person that can punish you is the person who has coercive power. Reward power is the flip side of that. If they're in a position to give you something you want, to reward you, they have a certain power over you because of the power that they hold. Legitimate power comes from the fact that you're part of a hierarchy or an organization, and because of this, and because people accept the power dynamics inherent in that hierarchy, you have power just because of the position you hold. Think about the military. If you are an enlisted soldier, a corporal, or a private, and you encounter somebody who is a commissioned officer, a lieutenant, or a captain, you don't know anything else about that person if you haven't met him before or her. But because that person has a much higher rank than you, and because you accept the hierarchical structure of the military, you defer to that individual and acknowledge that they have power over you. And that power would be called legitimate power, because the power doesn't really come from any quality that that individual has. It comes from the position that the person holds. Now, some power bases are personal. They come from the individual. Expert power, for example, is something that an individual has when that individual has skills or knowledge or information that other people don't have. And having that information is power, and that gives the person an advantage over the people who don't have the same information that he or she does. Referent power refers to the fact that you have power over other people simply because you're very charismatic. You're optimistic, you're energetic, you have charisma. People like you and they want you to like them. And they want to hang out with you. They want to be associated with you. And so, if you are one of these lucky people, the power that you hold over other people is known as referent power. Now, one of the general rules of having power is something called the general dependence postulate. So, the more somebody depends on you, the more power you have over them. So, dependence is a really strong factor in determining who has power over whom. There's a theory of leadership that is based on understanding leadership as a function of the kind of power that an individual holds. I could have talked about this theory when we did the module on leadership, but I thought it fit more nicely here in the module on power. This is called impact theory, and impact is an acronym for the different bases of the different leadership style that are based on different types of power. So according to this, there are 6 different leadership styles, and each leader is one of these 6 types. And because the person depends on a certain type of power as a leader, they're only effective in particular situations. There are certain climates that play to that leader's strengths. So let's just go down the list on the slide here. If your leadership style is an information leadership style, that means you depend primarily on expert power. You know stuff. You have information that other people don't have. And your ideal climate for being a leader is one where the followers are in ignorance. They basically don't know what they need to know to get things done. And because you have that information, you're in a position of power over them. This kind of power may not work very well in other situations. Think of yourself in a study group, or you're working together with somebody on a lab project, and this person has certain skills, be they laboratory skills or statistical skills, but the project isn't going to be done very well without them, and so you're sort of dependent on that person because of the expertise that he or she has. A person who has a magnetic leadership style is relying primarily on referent power. They're the ones that have the charisma and the optimism and the energy, and they make people feel good. And these people are most effective in a time of despair. This is the type of leader you need when morale is low. Somebody that can come in and make you feel good and give you hope. Somebody who has a position leadership style is dependent upon legitimate power. They have power because they represent a certain position in the hierarchy, and they represent stability. So at a time where there's a lot of confusion and chaos, we sort of look to the hierarchy. We look to the structures that we've come to trust for guidance. And therefore, the person in that position, when times are chaotic and confusing, will have power. An affiliation leadership style is one where you have a leader who likes and cares about other people, is reassuring, and so this person's going to be good in a climate of anxiety when people are worried and they just need to be reassured. This is the person that can soothe people's feelings. So the person who has a coercive or reward style, depending on whether they're using rewards or punishment, is good in a time of crisis. You got to get things done quickly. Decisions have to be made. And the person who can immediately punish and reward people gets things moving a lot faster than somebody who's depending on some other style of leadership. A tactical leadership style is the individual who leads through the use of strategy and plans. So when things are a little disorganized, there's not a lot of clear goals, having somebody who knows how to put together a plan and point you to the future and give you something to work toward can be very effective. So you've got these different styles of leadership. They can all be effective, but they're best when they match the situation that the leader finds him or herself in. So if you're using the impact leadership model as a way of understanding how to be an effective leader, there are a couple of ways that you can use this. First of all, be aware that certain climates are going to be better than others for your leadership style, and you want to gravitate toward those situations that match the style of leadership you have and the kind of power you have. Some people believe that you can change your leadership style to better fit a situation, and some management trainee programs try to get leaders to adapt different styles to match the needs of the followers at the time. Another way of using your strengths best would be to change your followers' perceptions of the climate. So maybe people are worried and anxious for no good reason, so you change their perceptions of what's going on, and maybe the new situation or the new perceptions of a situation that you've created will be a better fit for your leadership style. And maybe you are in a position to actually change the situation, change things around so it works more to your advantage. The word politics is used in a lot of different ways, but when we're talking about organizational politics, the politics that go on in the workplace, what you're really talking about are different groups or different individuals leveraging the power they have to work to their own advantage. And so politics is the playing out of conflicting power in the workplace. One department vying with another one individual competing with another one for a promotion, for example, or to have influence with the boss. And politics is a very human activity, although chimpanzees and other very social animals also certainly have politics, but none of them are as complicated as human politics, especially human workplace politics. Your textbook goes into quite a bit of detail using sexual harassment as an example of a recurring workplace power issue. And it is definitely related to power. You find more sexual harassment in workplaces where there's a greater power differential between managers and employees than perhaps there ought to be. And this sets the stage for all kinds of things. And you're going to learn about this in the textbook. And you're going to also read about some of the sticky issues that organizations run into. For example, do you try to set rules that forbid people from having romantic relationships and sex with their coworkers? This is kind of an uphill battle because at work is where you spend most of your waking hours, and this is where you meet people, and it's only natural that things are going to happen. But when this gets misused by people in power, it becomes a very serious issue. And that's why Title IX exists, for example, to give individuals who have been harassed some recourse. I won't talk about this anymore in this presentation, but be sure you study this pretty well in your text.